Hello, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Regional Development Forum for Asia and the Pacific Region 2020. We are delighted to welcome participants, our moderator, panelists, experts from around Asia Pacific region to attend the pre-session, Inclusive Connectivity on this pre-forum session on 3 November. This webinar is organized by ITU that aims to identify the emerging priorities for digital connectivity and serve as a platform for sharing strategic orientations and developing partnerships that may contribute to the development of the Telecommunication Development Bureau (BDT) regional work plan in between WTDCs. Before we move on to the opening remarks, there is a short announcement on the technical details of today's webinar. Now, allow me to share the guideline for this meeting. Please check that your microphone and camera are muted. In fact, the IT moderator will mute everyone and only unmute them when the moderator recognizes them. Please be informed that we are recording this session, and photos will be taken throughout the sessions. And we request the speakers and moderators to turn on their camera during their sessions. There will be opportunities to raise questions throughout the session. You may also use the chat platform to share your thoughts or make any comments, and a Q&A box to ask a question. Moving forward, now I'm pleased to give the floor to my dear Ms. Moderator, Ms. Anju Manggal, Head of Asia Pacific Region A4AI Web Foundation. Anju, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Ruri. Ruri continues to advocate on gender equality, and we appreciate what she does behind the scenes. So Bula and Namaste, everyone. I hope you're well despite the challenges you face today. My condolences and thoughts are with our friends and colleagues and their families who have been affected by COVID-19 and the recent disasters, especially in Philippines and Turkey. We hope for the best and would like to remind everyone to stay strong. Before I carry on, just to let you know, we have closed captioning for you and our wonderful captioner Tina will assist. I would also like to encourage you to use the Q&A forum to ask your question in between even the sessions. So as Ruri mentioned, my name is Anju and I'll be your moderator for today. I work for the Alliance for Affordable Internet, which is an initiative of the World Wide Web Foundation. We are the world's broadest technology sector alliance, and we work to drive down the price of broadband and advocate on meaningful connectivity. And this is done through policy and regulatory reforms. And we focus on a multi-stakeholder approach. So we continue to work with civil societies, private sector, public sector, academia, governments, and any other stakeholders. So today's topic is very important, inclusive connectivity. Despite the impact of internet and also technology on society, that there is still a digital divide between those who have access to the internet and those who do not have access to internet. So this basically gives rise to inequalities, particularly for persons with disabilities, our marginalized groups, people living in rural and remote communities, and women in particular as well, who are also finding it difficult to access opportunities, information, and digital services. So having meaningful connectivity and inclusive connectivity around the Asia-Pacific region, it still remains a big challenge, particularly in the context of COVID-19 and the natural disasters that we face today. So the question still remains, how do we close the digital gap? And how do we ensure an all-inclusive connectivity? And most importantly, how do we walk the talk? So today we will hear from our hardworking panelists who will provide an overview of the initiatives they're working on. Please allow me to introduce you to the speakers today. We have John Garrity, Chief Technical Advisor for UNDP. We have Thomas Lamanauskas, who is the MP Envision and advisor of Telecommunication Development Bureau. And we have Amir Riaz, who is the lead organizer of this workshop and working with ITU. So without any further ado, I would like to invite our first speaker, John, to highlight the key outcomes from the ITU and the ADB webinar on closing the connectivity gap, which was held last month. John, over to you.
Great. Thank you very much, Anju, for that warm introduction, and good morning, good afternoon to all of you who are participating here on the pre-session for today. It's a real pleasure to join you all, and thank you, Anju, also for your kind remarks. I'm joining you from the slopes of Mount Makiling here in the Philippines, about 60 kilometers outside of Manila. And yes, we had the typhoon come through, but luckily much of its strength dissipated as it was passing by. As Anju mentioned, and thank you very much for presenting the slides, Ruri. As Anju mentioned, my role in the session today is to convey some of the discussion and the outcomes and the highlights from a joint webinar that was hosted by the ITU and the Asia Development Bank a few weeks ago on advances in closing the connectivity gap in the Asia Pacific. If you could advance to the next slide, please. This discussion was really a platform for the exchange of ideas with participation from public policy and decision makers. If you just go back one more slide to the agenda slide with all of the participants' faces. If you can go, perfect, thank you. So this is really a platform for discussion between policymakers, decision makers, ICT regulators, and other representatives from industry and development partners to talk about some of the tools, some of the practices, and some of the programs that different players within the region are conducting as we try and close the digital divide. The focus was very much on equitable connectivity, and we'll talk about some of the points raised throughout that session. And then there were participation from a range of different organizations. So Thomas Abel, who's the Chief of the Digital Technology for Development Unit at the Asia Development Bank, Anju from the Alliance for Affordable Internet, and her colleague Sonia George, who's the Executive Director of the Alliance for Affordable Internet. We also had Scott Minahane, who's the Managing Director of Windsor Place Consulting, representation from GSMA's Mobile for Development Group, Rahul Shah, who leads the Asia region for GSMA M4D, and of course, Amir Riaz, who shares some of the ITU work. If you can go to the next slide, please. So essentially, there were two overarching issues that we all are confronting today in our work on connectivity. The first is the fact that the current COVID-19 situation is being coupled with the existing digital divide. And what we're seeing and what we're concerned about is that this is leading to widening income inequality. And so, the graphic on the cartoon on the left is just a visual representation of this. But in terms of education, as an example, the United Nations estimates that about 1.5 billion school children, billion with a B, were affected by school closures this year because of COVID-19. And only about 2/3 of those school children were able to access any level of remote learning options. And of course, at varying levels and varying intensities based on what sort of connectivity technologies are available. Even the IMF notes that this is a big concern, that COVID-19 can lead to widening income inequality. And you see the quote here from the IMF Managing Director, basically saying that COVID-19 has triggered a mass migration from analog to digital, but the benefits are not being seen by everyone. And this growing digital divide is set to be one of the legacies of the crises. So if you could go to the next slide, please. So the first issue is the widening, the digital divide coupled with this external shock of COVID-19. A second issue that I think is really important to put on the table for this discussion as it relates to inclusive connectivity is the fact that I think we need to refine our understanding of what is internet use and internet users. These are labels where, for the most part, the definitions are binary, right? You're either connected or you're not. But in reality, there's a very wide experience, a wide range of experiences, intensities of internet use. So the current prevailing indicator that measures internet use, the 4.1 billion internet users, that's measured if an individual has used the internet at least once in the last 3 months. So, you know, if you use the internet once in the last 3 months, you're considered an internet user. Whereas on the other end of the spectrum, I'm sure many of you and many of us who are participating today have multiple internet accessible devices that are just accessing high-speed broadband. And so it's a wide range of intensities, and it's something that we need to, I think, move forward from. And so that's why in the ITU and UNESCO Broadband Commission for Sustainable Development report last year, the Broadband Commission introduced a notion of what is meaningful universal connectivity. And that definition is here. Basically, broadband adoption that's not just available, accessible, relevant, and affordable, but it's also one that's safe, trusted, empowering, and leads to positive impact. And so hopefully we can go into further discussion on this notion of meaningful universal connectivity beyond just, is somebody an internet user or not in the data. If you could go to the next slide, please. This is something that I know, Anju, you and your colleagues are very much focused on, and you raised it very well in that session. Basically, how do we move from a notion of meaningful connectivity to how you actually measure it? And so it'd be great for us to discuss the next steps and how do we actually move from binary internet usage to measuring meaningful connectivity. And A4AI has presented a framework around the minimum threshold of daily use, around the minimum threshold on the type of device, data access, and the level of connection. Another thing that A4AI raised in the context of our conversation on the webinar was this notion of affordability. It's at the heart of A4AI, but and it's something that a number of organizations like the ITU and the Broadband Commission measure. How many countries are reaching a notional threshold of affordability based on broadband service, and that's a 2% per monthly GDP per capita threshold. However, even countries that are meeting that at a national level have sizable populations that of lower income communities who don't hit that threshold just because of how income, you have different strata of income within a society. And the more unequal an economy in terms of income inequality, the more individuals actually can be above that 2% threshold, even if the national average hits that 2% threshold. If you go to the next slide, please. From the ADB, my colleague Thomas Abel presented in the session, as well as some of the comments that were shared yesterday by the Asia Development Bank Director General for Sustainable Development and Climate Change, Woo Chung-um, that ADB is working across all sectors to reduce the digital divide, specifically by improving access to reliable internet service, lowering the cost of connectivity, and improving the usability of internet services. So something that Amir talked about in the Digital Pacific session yesterday was the importance of undersea cables in the Pacific. That is something that ADB is investing in and supporting countries in the development of undersea cables. And there's a good example from Tonga, where the undersea cable has reduced prices by about 50% and supported the connection of remote communities. I'm going to go through these quickly because I know I'm running out of time, Anju. The next slide also it talks about ADB's work with satellite connectivity, also something that Amir talked about yesterday in the Digital Pacific session. And this relates to inclusive connectivity because in these remote communities, remote island states, if you're not able to get fiber connectivity, then the next best option because of the remoteness is satellite connectivity. And ADB has invested and supported the launch of a Ka-band satellite company, Pacific, last year. And here in the Philippines, where with my UNDP hat, we are working with satellite providers for a free Wi-Fi program. Ka-band is something that's very welcome to the market that's predominantly supported by Ku-band connectivity. If we can go to the next slide, I'll just skip this one because this talks about ADB's technical assistance with different countries. And if you go to the next slide, the ITU intervention was very much focused, and Amir will cover most of the ground on this, very much focused on the wide range of tools that ITU has and knowledge products. And so I won't rehash those, but I did want to stress one that is coming out next month, the ITU Last Mile Internet Connectivity Solutions Guide, which is very much a step-by-step engagement tool for focusing on how do you identify specific communities that do not have connectivity. How do you identify what are their constraints to getting connectivity service in that area, and then moving through with reviewing existing options, determining what are sustainable solutions, and then implementing those solutions. So watch this space with the solutions guide. And if you can go to the next slide. The other intervention was from GSMA's Mobile for Development group, which is really leading the charge on a number of different ways to utilize mobile connectivity for development interventions. They have a wide range of programs. I won't go through them here, but just to stress that GSMA M4D has actually been really leading the charge on how do you measure the gender digital divide, which is key to this discussion on inclusive connectivity, along with, of course, the ITU and A4AI. GSMA has also been very much focused on also looking at what's unique mobile subscription. So how do you get to not just basic internet use, but mobile subscribers? If you could, I want to make sure that we have time for conversation. So the next slide is on some of the work that the ITU has done around looking at the responses to the COVID crisis. And I know Tomas is going to spend some time talking about Reg for COVID. So I won't spend any time here, just to say that the material is available and the report is available online. And just to wrap up, if we can just go to the last slide, maybe just to stress again from the ADB perspective. If you can go one more slide, please. Yeah, just from the ADB perspective. This is something that the ADB president, Asakawa, mentioned a couple of days ago in his remarks. But basically the importance of digital technology to close the digital divide and to do so by expanding existing investments in digital infrastructure. So let me end here. I know I've gone over. I apologize, Andrew. I hope it hopefully doesn't eat too much time. But just to say that the session video and the presentations from all of the presenters are available on the link shown here.
Great, thanks, John. You did well in terms of time, so well done. As you said, I think it's important to close the connectivity gap and divide. And to me, this requires global cooperation, leadership, and of course, investments. And I welcome our participants who are actually with us today to work with us to close the connectivity gap. So thank you for that, John. So our next speaker is Thomas, and he will share a video on Connecting to Recover initiative and also share some insights on the work that he's currently doing. Thomas, over to you.
Thank you very much, Andrew. And if I may ask Rory to launch the video first. So a few minutes, so a few seconds for the video, understand?
Can someone please launch the video? Thomas, maybe you could just provide a few insights in terms of what Connect to Recover initiative is about.
Thank you very much, Andrew. I'm happy to do that, and especially that I think it's a very nice segue to what John was talking about closing the digital gap. And I think Connect to Recover initiative is actually now in the line of a few initiatives related to COVID-19. And this initiative is exactly trying to address that. So basically galvanize the global action to implement specific projects, country-level projects, to support the closing digital gap. And John also mentioned, some of our other projects that we've started with. So when we started our response as ITU to COVID-19 and challenges that happened, so specifically with the Reg for COVID platform, which by now collected more than 400 responses of the policymakers and regulators and other stakeholders what was done. And based on that, we now can identify the actions that's needed. I understand the video is now ready, so let's watch the video first, and then I'll continue after that, Andrew. Thank you very much. Okay, still a few seconds. It's every good IT telecoms related conference needs to have some technical challenges, no? So
yes, connectivity issues.
Expanding access to digital technologies and services has been ITU's core mandate since its establishment. COVID-19 has demonstrated the critical nature of connectivity and the need for increased resilience of digital infrastructure to ensure that societies remain connected and functional even in the face of emergencies. As the global community is moving to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals by 2030, ITU is working to ensure universal and affordable access to digital networks, services and applications in line with its Connect 2030 agenda. According to ITU's Economic Experts Roundtable, countries with high-quality digital infrastructure have been better prepared to mitigate the negative economic impact of COVID-19. But the digital divide has hampered socio-economic progress, especially in underserved regions, such as sub-Saharan Africa, where 62% of people are not connected to the internet. Even in advanced economies, not everyone is connected. 14% of people in Western Europe do not have access or use the internet. Financial pressures caused by COVID-19 will make it even harder to connect everyone. In support to COVID-19, ITU's initiatives aim at supporting countries to leverage the potential of digital solutions to address the current global emergency and to plan and implement recovery. These initiatives aim to create a shared knowledge base on the regulatory, policy, financial interventions and the technology required to expand connectivity. ITU's Global Network Resiliency Platform, Reg for COVID, helps policymakers, regulators and industry players worldwide to ensure that networks are kept resilient and telecom services are available to all to the maximum extent possible as they cope with the impact of COVID-19. Led by ITU and UNICEF, the GIGA initiative aims at catalysing the funding required to bring connectivity to schools and communities. The Smart Villages platform, together with operators and small and medium-sized enterprises, provides interactive voice services on COVID-19 to everyone in Niger in 5 local languages. Launched in partnership with Cisco, ITU's Digital Transformation Centres initiative focuses on providing digital skills to citizens, and in response to COVID-19, the centres have been offering a free-of-charge programme on remote teaching. The Broadband Commission for Sustainable Development, co-convened by ITU and UNESCO, put forward an agenda for action to extend internet access and boost capacity to fight COVID-19. ITU's new initiative, Connect to Recover, aims at reinforcing the digital infrastructure of beneficiary countries and supporting their COVID-19 recovery efforts and preparedness for the new normal, as well as potential future pandemics. ITU is launching the Connect to Recover initiative with the support of the governments of Japan and the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. As highlighted in the United Nations Secretary-General's Roadmap for Digital Cooperation, COVID-19 has underscored the urgent need for digital cooperation and to provide affordable access to digital networks to every adult by 2030. In response to the UN Secretary-General's call to build back better, ITU is calling on the international community to connect to recover and to build back better with broadband.
Thank you very much for showing this video, and I hope now that you already know a little bit on what is Connect to Recover and we're trying to achieve. We'll also try another innovation, and hopefully it will work, which is a little poll here to understand what you as an audience think about what are the key topics that we as an ICT community need to focus in the wake of COVID-19. So it's really great to try this quick poll, which is basically, you just have to choose one of the 5 options. Even if you think all of them are equally important, it's just good to choose one, just to see relative importance. So whether we should strengthen network resiliency, connecting more people, or develop digital services applications, focus on skills, or finally focus on financial sustainability of the industry. And Amir or Ruri, whenever you think we're ready, if you could show the results.
10 seconds more.
Great. So 10 seconds more for everyone.
Just select your answer and we will end now. And thank you.
Thank you very much. So you can see the results. So we see, thank you very, very much. So we see it's, I think, two winning parts is connecting more people and developing digital services and applications. And we see that, we definitely need to still, everyone knows we need to be inclusive and bring more people online, both on infrastructure and services level. But I can see pretty important interest on other areas. I mean, it's probably not just the best for our industry, that the lowest scoring point is industry sustainability, even though we know that industry is also not having the best times. Anyway, so now we just a couple of more minutes just to do a bit of go a little bit deeper in the initiative. So if we can go to the next slide, please. Please, next slide. We can. Yep, thank you very much. So basically, as we just presented, so and you saw in the video, so John extensively explained that COVID-19 really highlighted how essential for our lives is digital infrastructure and services. So I think I'm now here will be preaching to a choir if I'll try to kind of give more proof points to that. So maybe we can go to the next slide, please. Just clicking to the next slide. Thank you very much. So therefore, Connect to Recover initiative is building on initiatives that were more about experience sharing and gathering information and allowing everyone to know what to do. Connect to Recover initiative actually seeks to do, so that's actually, so it aims to expand the availability of affordable and reliable infrastructure for all. And as you rightly just said in Paul, that's exactly what's important. Please, next slide. So basically, Connect to Recover initiative, it's in its initial stage, has three key building blocks. So first building block is a global methodology for what we call digital resilience. So it allows it would allow countries either to self-assess or to, with the help of other people, including ITU, to assess how well the digital infrastructure coped with COVID-19 and how well it is prepared for the challenges going forward for the new normal. So we already launched the work on that, on the preparation of the methodology, which will be available to all in a few months, we hope. Then second piece is, or second building block, is based on that methodology to do actually country assessments and to help countries develop the strategies on how to strengthen digital infrastructure. That means strengthen resilience, but also connecting more people in the right places. And then third is pilot projects. So basically, Connect Recover initiative will also help launch and help initiate pilot projects to actually test the project. So it's not only policy we're talking about, but also talking actually trying to apply the policy so that we could later scale it. Please, next slide, please. Next slide, if you can. So we already mentioned that we have launch partners. We can stop here. Yeah. So we have launch partners, Japan and Saudi Arabia, and I'm also very happy to pre-announce, if I may, that we're having discussions with Australia, from Asia Pacific region, and they also expressing strong interest to support this initiative. So we're hoping to welcome Australia as a third our partner. But of course, and as you see this slide, we also welcome as many partners and supporters to this initiative as possible, both government donors and partners, but also private sector partners who are willing to work together with us, not necessarily financial, but also in kind, helping countries to strengthen digital infrastructure, as well as we go to the countries, we'll start working with the national multi-stakeholder environments to ensure that we all work together in the right governance to advance that, please. And I think with that, basically, we can just go to the next slide. We just calls you all to join us in this important work. And I will be happy to answer any questions once we have a Q&A session. Thank you very much, Anju, and over to you.
Thanks, Thomas. I gave you an extra minute because of the video issues. The poll clearly says it all. It's all about connecting the people. And again, in his presentation, basically saying multi-stakeholder engagement is key. And I believe that one of the key focus of this initiative will be to ensure that its further scalability, including, through engaging additional partners and donors, particularly during COVID-19 and in the face of emergencies. So I'm not going to say any further because obviously we're running out of time as well. So our final speaker is Amir Riaz. He will present the digital network connectivity tools and guidelines and the amazing initiative called GIGA. Amir, over to you.
Thank you, Ms. Anju. Greetings, everyone, and thanks for joining this session, which is kind of like a pre-session and feeds well into the upcoming sessions as well. So my intervention today is on two topics. Next slide, please. Mainly, I will cover the areas of, as mentioned by the moderator, the connectivity and the issue of affordability, and I will cover them in 4 segments. Next slide, please. So let's start with some of the statistics. If you see from the Asia Pacific region, the number of households and the number of people that are connected are below the world average. This is a concern in terms of connectivity. But if we go towards the affordability statistics, next slide, please. Here you also see the prices are higher than other regions. If you compare, let's say, from Arab states, of course, with Africa, there we have much better prices, and the most of the world has better prices. But in Asia and the Pacific, if for the low usage and the high usage, the prices are on the higher side. And if you go on the rightmost side where the LDCs are there, the situation becomes even worse. So the ones that require connectivity, they have to pay the highest, and this is, this aggravates this whole situation. So the connectivity is not there, and those who are living in the developing world or the least developed states, they have to pay the most to get the connectivity. Next slide, please. So in the from the 2 slides that mentioned, the problem on this are both resilient infrastructure and affordability. And there are specific interventions that we have to do with the partners and with the countries. Then there, to do this, we have some tools on both ends. In case of, for example, resilient infrastructure, we have some tools in case of spectrum, and then we have to intervene using the regulatory regimes. And this is common between affordability and resilient infrastructure interventions, the policy interventions and the regulatory regime. Go ahead, please. Next slide. The next situation that we have to see in the Asia Pacific, please go back, is the level of the regulatory regimes. How prepared are they? So in ITU, we have tried to categorize the regulators, and what we see is that in Asia Pacific there are regulators who are at G4 level, which is the generation 4 level. But most of the countries, they have the regulatory regimes, and the capability of the regulators are not at either G1 or G2 level, and there is a room for improvement. Although we have seen a lot of improvement and changes from 2007 to 2018, the countries have had changes in their regulatory regimes and developed a more feasible competitive environment for affordable connectivity, but there is still room for further improvement. Next slide, please. So what all of this says is that there is no solution, one solution that fits all, and we have to have targeted interventions. Maybe we can combine some sub-regional countries with similar situation, but we have to have targeted interventions based on some best practices and guidelines. So here on end, I will try to give you information on some of the guidelines and toolkits that are available. First is the very famous ITU broadband transmission maps. These are basically maps which provide information on the submarine and the terrestrial fiber links, which are the most important when you when you want to develop a connectivity in any geographical area. Recently, we have also overlaid the connectivity, the coverage of 4G, 2G, and 3G, but our main focus remains on the fiber, because this is, if you want to connect a village or a community, we need to have a backup link that is connected to a fiber cable. In addition, we have the information of microwave, satellite earth station, and more importantly, the IXPs as well. Next slide. usages that we have seen of this transmission maps are there. For example, in case of Sierra Leone, next slide. In case of Sierra Leone, you can see that using this map, we could draw information on how much is the distance of the schools from the available fiber point, and there we could plan the investments and the best available technology. Next slide, please. Similar is the information on the Kenya, and next slide, and in Kazakhstan in the it's very important case of Kazakhstan, which is also an LLDC. So here in the effect is more prominent using this tool. Next slide, please. So as I think mentioned by John in his intervention, we are building up a last mile connectivity guideline, but this is not just a guideline. It's a combination of our earliest internet guides, and it also provides a connectivity toolkit solution. For example, here I just made a profile of the tool that is available. So you can input some data about a school, what are the requirements of a school, where it is, and based on that information parameters, it can give you a idea of what are the investment required, what is the best solution, whether it's wireless or the fiber or a satellite. And this gives a planning information for all the policy makers on what kind of how and where they could use their money to bring the most impact. Next slide, please. The one other initiative that we are doing is the GIGA. This is an initiative that we are doing with the UNICEF. It basically has 4 parts. First, we map the schools that that require connectivity and identify the gaps. And at the very first thing, we need a sustainable financial model, which is very much needed because the number of schools that we have in any country that are very big. Then we implement fit for purpose infrastructure, followed by empowerment using the digital services. I get the point that I have to go a little further. And all of these requires a different thematic areas to come under play. And we are working within our regional initiatives and the Connect 2030 agenda of ITU to deliver all of the activities under this GIGA project. Next slide, please. So how it goes with the country, if someone, a country is interested, the first they will review the country level GIGA requirements, followed by working with us to conduct a national level information sessions where we involve all the stakeholders from not only from ICT, but also education, financial ministry, regulators, and all the private sectors, so that we have a full national onboarding. Based on this, the country writes to us a letter of intent, and then we go towards the pilot projects. We have already seen a lot of interest from countries in the Asia Pacific. Some are mentioned there, and for the others, we are already talking. If you need further information, my colleagues and the Asia Pacific focal point, the email address is there. Next slide, please. These GIGA initiatives, they are based on the tools that are and the guidelines that are mentioned. I will not go much into the details, but the smart villages, digital skill assessment, all of these are available online as well. Next slide, please. So in conclusion, what I would like to say is that mere connectivity is not needed. We have seen the connectivity, the real impactful connectivity is one that is affordable, and we cannot do it alone, and no country can do it alone. We need partnerships that are workable. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Amir. Great to hear that you're looking at a multi-stakeholder approach, especially for this GIGA project. And like you said, I think it's important, or the important message that you mentioned is that we need to involve our national stakeholders. So I would also encourage our attendees to join this partnership and learn more about what we can do, especially for your particular country and your community. So I'm going to hand it over to our, sorry, not hand it over, but I'm going to give a chance to our audience to ask any questions. If you have any questions for our panelists, or even comments, like perhaps you can tell us about an initiative that you're working on, or how we can collaborate. Okay, I will give you a chance to ask questions, but I'm going to go over to the panelists. Please feel free to use the Q&A. So coming back to the panelists, maybe each of you can just provide one or two intervention. How do we overcome some of the challenges, particularly during disasters? And especially, you know, in the recent years, we have lots of disasters in the Asia and the Pacific region. We continue to face natural disasters, but we also have limited capacity in national governments. We have lack of resources sometimes. So do you have any thoughts on how we can ensure sustainability of these initiatives and making sure that it's not just a one-off ad hoc initiative, but we need continuation? So I'll start with maybe John or Thomas.
Sure. Yeah, happy to jump in here. And I think the situation for a lot of countries in the Asia region, whether it's an archipelago state like Indonesia with 17,000 islands, or the Philippines with 7,000 islands, you have situations where a homogeneous network deployment is not going to necessarily be the best way to have a really resilient network infrastructure. And so, you know, whereas in some countries you can focus on fiber deployments to the curb, to the premise, to the house, in places like the Philippines and Indonesia and other archipelagos and island states, you really need to take an approach that allows for somewhat of a heterogeneous network deployment, where yes, you have fiber deployed to a lot of areas, but then you also have to rely on other connectivity technologies. So when you have a situation like we just had with a typhoon coming through here in the Philippines, you know, this typhoon was being compared to Typhoon Haiyan, which came through in 2014, knocked out communications completely to the central Visayas area here in the Philippines. And the only network infrastructure that was actually being able to be deployed at the time was TV white space connectivity, because that was being used in another project and it was repurposed until other technologies were able to come in. So that's a point on resiliency to ensure that you have a heterogeneous network deployment. I just want to maybe take the question that has jumped in the chat box, because it's a very interesting one that's come in on fiber and terrestrial paths in the broadband transmissions maps may not be the most accurate. I'll let the ITU colleagues answer that, but I just wanted to point out that mapping is incredibly important. And accurate mapping, I think, is even more important than having, well, of course, it's most important, but having bad map or having maps that are not accurate can be worse than having no map at all. And I don't say this about the ITU map, because I think it's there's a lot of really good data points there. But in the work that we did, for example, at USAID, where we were looking at network coverage maps, the prevailing mapping information that we have comes from MNOs and from their coverage circles that they publicly report. And a lot of times the incentive for an MNO to share coverage maps is more along the marketing or commercial side, rather than having really accurate maps. So an example, and I'll stop here, but an example here where I live 60 kilometers outside of Metro Manila. If you look at all the coverage maps, it says we have coverage right where I am, but those coverage maps don't take into account topology. They don't take into account a number of other issues, radio frequency, propagation, etc. So having accurate maps is of critical importance, both for disaster recovery, but also just so that investors know where is actually tangible investments, where tangible investments can go.
Great, thank you, John. And I think you raised a really important point in terms of MNOs. I mean, I'm sorry, directing it to Jonathan Brewer, that I think it also, onus is also lies in the MNOs and what they provide also to the development partners in terms of the making sure that it's correct information. So Thomas, would you like to respond to my earlier question?
No, I would love to, and especially because It's very closely related to what I've been working for quite a few months now, longer than we thought we would have to work on COVID-19, but it seems like, we've been working now for over 7 or 8 months and still, we're not at the end of it. So anyway, and I think emergency telecommunications has proven a really critical area in that, especially as some countries were having like a twin hits, so like, Vanuatu, which is close to my heart because I had the opportunity to spend quite a bit of time there. So, they had Cyclone Harold at the same time as they were having lockdowns, thankfully they didn't have any cases, of COVID-19, but still the situation is not uncommon, because countries now are facing restricting abilities to respond to emergencies, and the nature doesn't stop just because of COVID-19, So I think in that regard, it's important, just plugging a little bit marketing for my colleagues in other parts of ITU. So ITU has and just released actually right in time in spring this year, National Emergency Telecommunications Plan guidelines, and which helps countries to be prepared. And also now we're rolling out those guidelines with specific countries, helping them to actually prepare national emergency communications plans. With Connect to Recover, we recognize that COVID-19 emergency, if you will, is a bit different emergency from normal ones, because it's like it's an emergency that stays with us, as I mentioned, for quite a few months now. Normal emergencies kind of come and then we have to recover. Now with COVID-19, as we recover, we still live with it. So I think that's where we recognize that we need adapted methodologies, and we need to kind of extra layer of work to actually ensure that we're prepared for this type of slow-moving emergency, if you will, but that's built upon our standard emergency work, not substitutes that. So really encourage people to look at our work on national emergency communications plans, and also reach out to colleagues, to any of us if you're interested in that work as well.
Great. So if anyone's interested in these projects, I think reach out to our panelists, but I also would like to invite our panelists to just share some of the guidelines, methodologies, and information that you've presented through the chat forum, or through the chat forum, sorry. And also for your information, all this information will be available through the ITU website. Amir, would you like to just respond to Jonathan's question? I know you briefly mentioned it during your presentation, but I would just like to get you to respond maybe 1 or 2 minutes, and then also respond to the question that I had in terms of sustainability and ongoing initiatives.
Thank you. I just want to first, give information on the question that was in the chat box, and so the way it works, the ITU terrestrial map, is that we get the information directly from the operators, and then we put it in the system. This next step is the validation from the countries, from the administration. So until it's validated, it doesn't go public. So the unvalidated data, it remains in the TIES account. Under the TIES account, it's not available in the public. So what you see in the public is only the one that is validated by the administrations. So it might not be the best updated one, because we need the country's validation, but we have the data at the back that is the most updated one, but not yet validated. So in that sense, it's there. And our focus remains only on the terrestrial side, because terrestrial fiber connectivity, because it is the one that is very important in getting the coverages out. If you know where is the point of presence of a high capacity fiber, from there and you can use to do the coverage like 2G, 4G, or whatever the last mile coverage is. But the most important going forward, even in the most developed countries right now, the 5G is also the main effect is the backbone. So our idea remains again on having the most updated the maps, but not the most update is available in the public domain. I can just say on that.
Great, thank you. Would you like to respond to the question that I have in terms of sustainability, or you want me to?
So for sustainability, actually, there was different. We had a project that was mentioned by John as well with the Pacific. We had a project in the Pacific. We connected using the satellite connectivity number of islands, not only for connectivity but also providing some emergency communication strategic equipment. We developed a report which was presented in the pre-session yesterday, and we had some sustainability models there. The report is there, and the details we could share, but it would go a little longer in this session to go on this very targeted sustainability approaches for affordable connectivity. But it includes USFs, it includes partnership models with the private sector, it includes different models using the healthcare facilities, or using the e-government as a model to sustain in the long.
Great. Thank you so much for that, Amir. To our panelists, obviously there are no questions coming through the chat forum or even the quick Q&A.
So, Andrew, if I can just insist
oh,
a
yeah.
little bit, it's especially here, because I think one of the aspects, especially we've focused on Connect to Recover, and I mentioned this national multi-stakeholder engagement, is readiness of stakeholders, So I think, and when we now engage with the countries, really kind of our key criteria, when someone asks how to become a beneficiary of Connect to Recover, is actually readiness of the local stakeholders, not only government, but everyone else, to actually, do things, because then we can support the stakeholders if they are already organized, if they want to do and they prepare to do things, then it's easy to support. I think that's always the key to sustainability, that no one can bring these initiatives from outside. From outside, people can help, people can support with knowledge, people can most probably support with some extra funds, but it's really crucial. And if we see examples also in Asia Pacific where things work, that's where the political will is locally, and like collaboration between different stakeholders is forged locally. Then it's possible to actually develop sustainable initiatives.
Agree. And it's also the political willpower. We need to also take that into account. Let me ask a tough question, panelists, again. John, Thomas, and Amir. When we talk about inclusive connectivity, have you thought of including persons with disability in your design thinking processes, or the rural and remote communities who don't have direct link with the national governments? How do we bring them closer to these initiatives? How do they become part of these initiatives? Anyone?
Yeah, I'll jump in. Absolutely. I mean, I think it's very easy for us to default in these sorts of conversations to talking about technology and network infrastructure, and even affordability on the finance and economic side. And a lot of times in these conversations, we don't spend enough time talking about the different marginalized communities where a lot of times programming isn't, or products and services are not placing primacy on those communities. And one of the things we should be talking about much more so in this conversation too is the persistent digital gender divide that we see in a number of countries. In a number of countries, there's parity, and there's actually more women participating online than men, such as in the Philippines and Colombia. But in some countries, the digital gender divide is very sizable, and it's a challenge that's broader than just a technology or business model deployment one. In a lot of countries, it's driven by sociocultural factors, where you have to sort of approach the issue sort of like a crab, from the side, rather than saying, oh, here's a mobile phone, or here's a smartphone. So absolutely. I mean, that's part of the reason why the solutions guide, the last mile connectivity solutions guide was developed, and I participated in some of that development. And the whole idea there is that you start with the community, or you start with the constraints and the situation that's being faced. A lot of our programming, a lot of our work is done more at a national level. If we're talking about universal access, or the deployment of universal service funds to try and get full coverage, or at a sub-regional level. But really, I mean, a lot of it starts with the community itself, and some of the work that A4AI and the Internet Society and APC are doing on community networks is a good example of how you start from the community on outwards.
Great, thanks, John. I purposely didn't want to talk about technology or infrastructure or network issues because when Thomas did the poll, we clearly saw that connecting people is one of the most critical, important points, and that everyone raised on this discussion. So Thomas, would you like to add before I jump to Amir?
Yes, definitely. And I think it's a bit of a chicken and egg situation, because especially in a COVID-19 situation, we need digital connectivity, and people need digital connectivity to be included. But then at the same time, these groups that you're talking about are usually the most excluded, So it's so I think, and partly is, I think it's so partly is no silver bullet, but it's sometimes we just need to do things first, So we just need to connect people, having in mind those disparities and those disadvantages, So bring them on board, and then as we go, build the tools to include them better. So for example, again, ITU has issued the guidelines on accessibility in the context of COVID-19. So how to actually, basically bring digital information and services to people, with disabilities. The same we're trying to include with different programs. We, Equals had which is our gender flagship program, has a kind of sub-program now for LDCs together with the AF, so kind of helping women in rural areas, especially LDCs, to be more empowered through digital tools. So I think it's partly, you include people in the discussion, but basically my point is, to include people in discussion, you actually need to equip them with tools. So it's not two separate things, discussion and doing projects. It actually comes, they have to come together to be effective.
Great, thank you, Thomas. Amir, would you like to respond? And then we have 4 minutes, and then I will wrap up soon.
Thank you. Both of the panelists, they mentioned important issues, but what I would like to focus is on the partnerships to deliver. This in the RDF, we are one of the main focus of this RDF is to seek out some partnerships that are that should enable the affordable connectivity, and amongst all the others focus areas that we are working on. So as for example, today, just after this session, we are going to see with the policy level and the regulatory level, how the partnerships and what kind of partnerships are needed to deliver effect. But not only this, we need the industry as well. We are going to talk with the industry, and one of the more important role that is coming up is that of academia and SMEs. So we have to make sure that we have an approach that is more that covers all the stakeholders, and to bring in the innovation, we need the SMEs and the academia, because they're the ideas that they come, and we need their participation as well. So we look forward to deliberations today and tomorrow as well for this partnership. But these are very important things to achieve this goal of affordable and inclusive connectivity.
Great, thank you so much, Amir. These are great discussions, and obviously we're running out of time. We can't be sitting here all day. So thank you so much to the panelists. The discussions today highlight some really important points, but I think the need for policymakers, development partners, investors also to review some of these strategies that we have and some of the priorities that we have to make sure that everyone understands what inclusive connectivity is and how they can get involved with some of these initiatives. But also, like Amir said, that we need to involve the small business communities, because they're usually left out when we are discussing a lot of these issues in relation to connectivity or the challenges with digital gap. So on that note, I think it's a wrap, and I will hand it over to Ruri to say the final remarks before we close the session. And one more thing, there are some resources that are available through the chat forum. Please feel free to review them, and also get in touch with us if you need any information. We're happy to assist. Thank you.
Thank you, Anju. Actually, I don't prepare the final remarks, but I would like to thank our panelists and also my dear moderator to participate on today's session in inclusive connectivity, and we will see you soon for future collaboration. Thank you.
Great. 1 minute, and I think we should take a photo. So everyone, if you could just switch on your video, please. I think we did well with time. Okay, I'll take a video. Everyone ready? I see some, I'll give a chance to others to switch on their video. Don't be shy. Okay.
I'll take it.
All right. Okay, they're all coming on. And also thanks to our captioner. I really, really appreciate this. Thank you so much also for making it inclusive. Okay, I'm gonna take a photo.
Oops.
Oops, okay. Okay, smile. Okay, thank you so much. And like I said, please get in touch with us. We have amazing people who are working behind the scenes. So please get in touch with us and we can help you. Thank you and take care.
Thank you. Thank you, Anju. Thank you, everyone. And please follow and retweet our social media. Thank you.
John, Thomas, and Amir, thank you so much.
Thank you very much, all. Thanks so
Sure.
much.
Thank you. For
Bye-bye.
Thank you. The next session will start in 1 hour. Exciting on policy and regulation. So please join us. See you
Okay.
soon. This is the first time that Girls in ICT Day Thailand is celebrated virtually, and I'm pleased to see many participants from across Thailand who are able to join us.
I encourage you to continue to explore and engage with the world in new ways, pursue the study and career opportunities in ICT industry, become entrepreneurs, start your own firms, your own endeavors in the ICT, and develop into true leaders in ICT.
I would like to emphasize that raising awareness among girls and women in ICT sector is the priority to prevent them from inappropriate online platforms.
I appreciate ITU and our stakeholder efforts for the continuous work in placing importance on women empowerment in Thailand. Thank you, UNESCAP, UNESCO, FAO, APT, Cisco, DTAC, CCDKM for Sukhothai Thammathirat Open University, and for sure for ITU and NBTC. So now I declare International Girls in the ICT Days 2020 in Thailand open. Thank you.
If we were not convinced before, then by now we are surely convinced that the future must be inclusive, it must be resilient, it must be sustainable, and it must be digital. And because of that, I'm excited to join hands with all of you to make it possible for the girls of today to really be the catalyst for the future we want tomorrow.
I do hope IPT would join the celebration of Girls in ICT Day in Thailand in the years to come. As you all know, the activities for this year's celebration include the launching today, the leadership program, and trainings to be held in August and September.
Over the next few weeks, we want you to be encouraged, empowered, and to use your advancement in education and your skill sets that you secure to create economic opportunities for yourself. This program, which is taking place largely online, is being offered to you at a very critical time for the world, which has been affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. At the UN in Thailand, we are prioritizing innovation and digitization as a theme to build back better.
I would like to confirm IFAO's commitment of our work on ICT for food security and agriculture, and also our continuation of paying special attention to girls and women in our work.
And we believe that education in the field of STEM is a driver of innovations and economic growth. And women and girls have great potential in STEM. And one of the key barriers to women's and girls' participation is their own belief and confidence.
And our hope is that you continue on your ICT journey to take advantage of the wonderful career pathways and exciting job opportunities. Number one, we want you all to innovate like technologists. Number two, we all want you to think like an entrepreneur. And number three, and not the least, we want you all to act like social change agents.
We believe that digital is a game changer that will provide equal access to knowledge and economic opportunities for every woman and every
Girls in ICT program. I attended the program in 2018, 2 years ago. So it's very interesting. But what is more important is that the opportunity encourage and provide girls and women a safe and encouraging environment and empower us to really execute what we believe in.
And we hope that in the future, there'll be more like you to take the floor in the next year and the following year events. So thank you. I would like to thank all our partners for their encouraging messages and sharing their powerful statements to support girls and women in Thailand.
and mobile broadband application, IMT and non-IMT.
IMT 2020.
Different method of signal geolocation is interested for me.
Frequency monitoring for 5G networks.
Trend management is one of the most interesting in the training.
Outcomes of WRC-19.
The most interesting topic for me was satellite interference geolocation.
As one of the ITU's key training organizations, the State Radio Monitoring Center and State Radio Spectrum Management Center, SRMC, joined the ITU Asia Pacific Centers of Excellence program in 2014. SRMC, established in 1988, is a technical institution supporting radio management in China, directly affiliated to the Ministry of Industry and Information Technology. It is responsible for technical issues including the management of radio spectrum, radio stations, and the radio transmitting equipment, as well as the radio monitoring and information-based radio regulation. SRMC is composed of 15 divisions, 9 state-level monitoring stations, 2 affiliated institutions, and over 300 employees. Based on the COE, SRMC hosted 5 times face-to-face courses and 4 times online courses. The courses mainly focus on spectrum management and monitoring, spectrum engineering, IMT 2020, radio technology application, etc. Over 1,000 participants were trained during the last 5 years.
Welcome to the ITU Center of Excellence online training course.
I am from China.
Michelle, introduction of study activities in ITUR working competency.
Monitoring techniques based on radio sensors.
Civil UAV monitoring techniques.
Data acquisition and processing technology.
With all of the participants during the course.
Friendly.
Is inter-subjective.
Knowledgeable and interactive training session.
High-tech.
Awesome is my feedback for the training.
Helpful.
I would say inspiring.
Stay safe!